for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So start recording. So we'll just chat, and I'm
Chat.
and you're Shoshanna, and then I'm going to.
The PowerPoint?
Uh-huh.
Oh, it says it's being recorded. Great. I won't be able to actually see questions.
Oh, okay. Your little pop-up box disappears?
It does. See, like you can see.
So what I'll do is and actually that's good because I'll read the question aloud.
Well, I can get out of it at the end, but I won't know if anything's going crazy wrong during the workshop.
Okay.
Actually, that's what's see, because oh no, I pop up. So what do you see now that I'm sharing my screen?
I just see your stop saying yes when you need or want to say no.
I do have the pop-up then. It's still here for me. Okay, great. You just don't have it. Oh, this is great. Okay.
Testing the recording to make sure that the recording is going to work. So everyone else is muted but me. This is Christine. I'm just checking for a few minutes to see if the recording is going to work. And then I'm going to mute myself again and we'll get started in just a few minutes. I'm testing the recording again because something seems to not be working with that. So trying to figure out what the problem is. Okay, testing one more time.
Over yesing. It impacts their ability to fully enjoy these relationships and their lives, and it's this frustration and resentment that comes from overcommitting, from taking on too much, saying yes out of obligation, and feeling way too guilty about saying no, even when you need to, or especially when you just want to. So I created this workshop for understanding why we do it, why we over yes, and with some of my top tips for flexing your no muscle. I'm going to walk you through those tips today, and towards the end I'll be giving you some of my favorite ways to get started immediately on saying a no that gets respected, so you'll have actual language and practical tools you can implement today. I'd like everyone to think about, take a moment and think about a recent experience or an experience of when this happened for you, when you said yes, when you wanted to say no. It's totally okay if nothing comes up quickly to mind, but I always find it helpful to relate as the workshop goes along to real life experience, so you have just like a little bit of emotional skin in the game as we're going through it. So I think as Christine said, I'll be answering all questions at the end, so definitely drop them in to the box, and we'll get going. Okay, so first things first, take a moment to practice setting your first limit and say no to distractions. Let it be your first step towards your new way of flexing that no. Put up your do not disturb sign, silence all the bings, the bongs of your emails and texts. We're only together for about an hour, so take the time to be fully present. Spoiler alert, it's part of one of your upcoming action items, which we'll talk more about later. So to those of you who have joined a little bit late and missed the handout that got emailed earlier, it's in the handout little tab in the control panel. It's a follow-along workshop that I find helps keep the focus, stay present, and deepen the learning. So it's not essential, and I don't want you to get distracted at, but I will alert you to moments where you can jot down some notes. So this is a look at my home on the web, and in my work with individuals, couples, professionals, and teams, I've really distilled this work of communicating with clarity and confidence into a 3-part process. Today, you're actually going to get a bonus action item because one of the steps in the process is more intensive. It's deeper work that I do with clients. So I threw in a little bonus, really actionable item for you guys. So, but the process is how you can really break the pattern of too much yes behavior. That's probably, if you showed up enthusiastically for this topic today, sparking resentment and sucking up time. But where does all that negative, resentful energy go? It actually leads to stewing, relitigating arguments and conversations in your head, and I have found, especially at night, when reflecting on the day. Ultimately, this has a massive negative impact on our relationships. The good news is that cleaner and more direct communication, it's not as hard as you think, and it leads to all the good in your relationships, at home, at work, all around. So maybe you're a professional who is the go-to, get it done, never too busy one in the office, or you're a mom who runs a business out of the house and also runs the household. I didn't get to hear what everybody does, so sorry if I don't capture your what you're up to, but maybe you're a single professional struggling to get ahead, saying yes to everything and thinking, well, that's the key, but you're a little worried you're on the path to burnout, or maybe your mom has got it all together, spinning all those plates until you don't. Whatever story lands with you, I'm guessing that you're excited about this topic because you're worried about the costs of over-yesing and you've had enough. I'll tell you a little story about myself because I 100% get it. I have been there, done that. Early in my career, right out of graduate school, social work school, I was a fundraising and community organizing professional. I was a super hard worker with a high internal measure for what success looked like. So I never said no to projects or requests from supervisors. I was constantly racing out the door at the end of the day to pick up my young son, feeling guilty both about work left to do and about being late for pickup. I found myself working most nights after my son's bedtime. Wah, wah. Coworkers would routinely turn to me for help with mailings, projects, editing their copy, you name it. I was the go-to say yes helper. I even had a boss when assigning me an additional project that was completely outside of my portfolio actually say to me, you'll just work hard for a few weeks. And I'm sure I must have had quite the shocked look on my face because he quickly rephrased it to say, I mean, you'll just work harder for a few weeks. The truth was that people knew I wouldn't say no, and if I tried, they also knew on some level they could cajole and guilt me into saying yes. And I'm not done. After that, I went to work at a clinical agency, and there was so much pressure to just be physically in the office, even though my schedule was unique, and I worked odd hours to accommodate our client population, including evenings, off-site, at schools, making home visits. Coworkers would still grumble and make snide remarks about my coming and going. But they were not there at 9 p.m. when I left the office. I felt guilty all the time and was constantly justifying my schedule out loud. I was also working in a private practice a couple evenings a week and never said no to a new client. Sure, I wanted the experience, but would often let clients change their appointment times to times that just did not work for me, or say yes to a meeting that conflicted with something personal. Guess what happened? Pneumonia. This was a major, major wake-up call for me, and when my doctor told me I was one day away from being admitted to the hospital, double major wake-up call. And even without that hospitalization, I was in bed and out of work for weeks. I was a single mom at the time. It was a bucket of ice-cold water that I needed. My son depended on me to take care of myself and to set appropriate limits that I respected, regardless of how anyone felt about it. So that's when I made some serious changes, which led me to the place I am today. And I am totally, absolutely not perfect, but by and large, I'm much better as a clear communicator. I respect myself. I value my own time. I trust in myself that I will keep my commitments to myself and also to others, which has led me to set boundaries that get respected, reclaim more time in my life. I'm always thinking about my bigger yes, and it's helped me find more joy and feel way less guilty. And I did it by getting disciplined about my schedule. My available time slots were my slots. Just like my hairdresser or doctor, I made their times work for me because it was important. I got serious about my cancellation policy. I was always so worried about losing clients as a result of having a strict one, and guess what? It just got respected. I got super clear on the big old meanie in my head that was telling me I would only be valuable if I did it all, and practiced, saying no to that noise. And so that's exactly what we're going to work on today. I'm going to walk you through some of the ways I did it. So take out your worksheet. It looks like this. Hopefully you're able to get it either through the email or at the handouts tab. Don't worry, I'll direct you to it. It's just an additional tool to deepen the learning. So let's talk more about what's important about saying no. So the truth is that with every yes, you are straight up always saying no to something else. It's really important to remember this. The problem is that when you're constantly yesing, you're not consciously making that choice. You're making it by default, right? So what happens? You're saying no to the things that matter to you, but are too busy to factor in, like work projects that boost your profile or your learning, time with kids or your beloved or friends, volunteerism, passion projects, time to just chill and relax, fill in the blank. And then what happens? Massive costs, which I'll talk more about in a minute, but I first want to spend some time talking about why we do it. Why do we say yes when we want to say no? So some of the reasons are to be liked, to be part of the herd, part of the in crowd, to not make anyone mad, to be a team player, to prove yourself. You're tough enough, you can handle it, or you're person, woman, man, person enough to prove you're successful. Certainly to avoid criticism, all the old stuff, ingrained patterns, stories from our family or childhood or upbringing or what have you, that's just unconscious patterns of behavior. Oh, you definitely don't want to rock that boat, and you certainly don't want anyone talking about you. Anything else come up for you? Oh, I can't. Sorry, that one went really fast, but I can't. Take a moment to consider, jot some ideas down on your worksheet. It's under Bit of Knowledge section, Bit of Knowledge number 1 section. All of these reasons that I've listed before, and maybe some that you're thinking about now or jotting down now, they're so pervasive, and many of us deal with more than one or several of these issues. I want to highlight one of my favorite reasons or justifications for not saying no. It was at the very bottom of the last list, which is I can't say no to my mother-in-law or a work commitment or an event or, coffee with a friend. And I always ask those clients, you can't or you won't. There's a huge difference. Can't really underscores the unconscious ingrained patterns of non-choice making behavior really fuels our over-yesing. And I also just want to clarify, tonight we're talking about requests, not demands. I understand that sometimes there are things that are asked of us at work or in life that are framed as asks, but are not actually requests, and we simply must do them. But what we're talking about tonight are the many, many other items in our life that we can make choices around. That's what we're talking about today. So hopefully that clarification helps. So you know that soundtrack, that choir in your head that's telling you one or all the reasons why you must say yes, that voice, the one that's driving your reasons for yesitis, inflammation of the yes reflex. It's what I call your meanie, otherwise known as your who am I voice. And my guess is that meanie sure is mean. That who am I voice says, who are you to say no? Are you really that busy? What's one more thing? You can handle it. your mom or supervisor or Oprah would. Who am I to fill in the blank? Like, who am I to be so bold, to get a break, to get time off, to put myself first? Ugh, it's not worth it saying no, I'll just do it. Or who am I to say no when I can kind of do it even though I don't really want to, and it's too hard to have a conversation or fight about who else will do it, and so I'll just do it. Am I right? Sound familiar to anyone? The good news and the bad news, we have a choice in the matter. It's good news because we can actually change. The bad news is that this change happens through work, not magic. It's actually the centerpiece of some of the work I do with most of my clients, helping them to get grounded in their worth and value, confident and conscious in their choice to communicate their no, so they can communicate, they can choose their bigger yes. Okay, so what happens when we yes too much? What are the costs? It results in anxiety. That's right on the screen there. That's one I've experienced. It can result in stress, overwhelm, resentment, dropped balls. We tend to break our commitments to ourselves, which erodes our trust in ourselves. We just stop believing that we will actually follow through. So what's it costing you? Take a moment to jot that down. That's in bit of knowledge number 2. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to remind you that for me, it was pneumonia. But I was at the time also struggling with many other issues because of over-yesing, and I know I'm not alone. Always saying yes means resentment brews, leads to stewing. It also leads to, lashing out, snapping, frustration, aggravation, fights, and breakdowns, but for all the wrong reasons, right? Not for the reasons that we're actually, we don't snap about what's happened in the moment. It's the buildup. So those are some of the costs. And they're just some of the costs of letting the big meanie rule the show. Some of the other ways it shows up is, as it says here, resentment, brewing, stewing, staying too late at work, tension, unnecessary tension with our loved ones, exhaustion, illness. Something worse, stress is really, really rough. And since we already know that every time we say yes to something, we're saying no to something else, how does it show up in your life? What's falling through the cracks? Are you doing anything as well as you want to? Do you have tension with your beloved or kids or other family members or friends? Are you feeling stretched too thin? Do any of these resonate? Take a moment to jot down bit of knowledge number 3, how over-yesing is showing up for you, how it's impacting your life. If one of these resonated for you, grab it. And if it's something else, also important to see it in black and white so we can start to attend to it. So if any of this sounds familiar, you're in the right place. If you want to stop feeling resentful when you agree to something you don't really want to do and don't have time to do, or feeling like no matter how many ways you try to say no, it doesn't get heard or respected, or feeling like you are having to do it all and not getting any help at work or at home, or feeling guilty when your answer to a request is no. If that just has all the guilt flood in, you're in the right place. Or feeling guilty when you don't have a good reason to say no, but you really just want to. So the great news is you get a choice about who's in charge, how you want to feel, and you're probably saying, okay, but what now? Great. So I know this is not easy work, and I know it, so I'm going to encourage you to stick with it. I often think about how my grandmother always used to say, people don't like to hear no the first time, but they get used to it, and it's true. And here's the truth. We can't control others. We can't change others, and what can be difficult is that sometimes at first people really don't like it when we start to change ourselves and how we function as a result in relationships, choosing responding over reaction, choosing to set limits and follow through with them. Okay, so now we know that our internal voice is driven by, our internal story is driven by this who am I voice, the one that tells us we're not worthy or deserving of limits. And it honestly doesn't matter actually why we have that story. What's important now is understanding the costs and tuning in and becoming aware of what you're telling yourself. And it's really important, and I can't stress this enough. This work is ours to do. So often we look to external factors and other people to do our work, and guess what? It's a losing proposition. Never gonna happen. Other people don't change because we want them to. The truth is we change and people adapt. The fear here is that people will be mad or won't like us or whatever if we start to say no or set more limits. But the truth often I have found is when we start saying a no with grace, others don't even really notice. Or if they do notice, it's because their respect for us has elevated. So you've heard my story, you know I totally get it. So now we'll dig deeper into some action steps that I learned and what I take clients through. So step one, action item number one, awareness. It's first off it's important to clue in to the very real fact that this work is an inside job. Again, I already said it and I'm repeating it because it's important. Probably not the answer you want to hear, because on some level we want others to do the work because this is kind of tough stuff. We can't change others, and if we want things to change, we need to learn more about managing ourselves, how we handle our situations, and our reactivity. This work is an inside job, and it all starts with awareness. So that's action one item on your worksheet, paying attention to what happens internally when faced with a situation, a request, or an obligation that we really want to say no to, but maybe don't. It's the key first step. I always suggest starting with a low-stakes situation, like reading an email that comes through, right? When that notification flashes across the screen and it drags you out of what you're doing and you feel pulled to read it, but you're in the middle of something, low-stakes situation, right? That's what I'm talking about. Or doing a chore at a specific time, like the dishes or walking the dog. Starting to pay attention to those moments where it's like, should I, shouldn't I, don't really want to do it right now, and what you notice inside of you. It's just noticing that. Don't judge it, just tune in. And don't try to control or change it. It's not the point. So awareness is the first important step to starting to understand why we say yes when we don't want to and frankly don't need to. You'll also notice, maybe if you are, and I would encourage you to pay attention to some of the bodily sensations that come up, like when you kind of want to say no, do you feel a little throat tightening or butterflies in the belly, or even a rumble or some nausea or pitter-patter of the heart, things like that to pay attention to. Okay, so action item number one is awareness. What's the goal? Well, it's not to stop the thoughts from rolling in. We actually can't do that. And the goal is certainly not to beat ourselves up, something some of us are pretty expert at as well. Probably a topic for a different workshop. The goal is actually to change how we react to it, how we roll, how we ride the waves, for example. So often these negative thoughts show up like, oh, if only I, or once I fill in the blank, then I will fill in the blank, or darn it me, if I could just stop doing whatever. So start by paying attention to these reactions we have, or things that come up when we want to start setting a limit or saying no. So pro tip, you guys, no one beats themselves up into the life of their dreams or achieving their goals or a promotion or better relationships. So awareness of these negative self-talk or self-limiting behaviors is key. And once you start noticing, it's almost impossible, I have found, to not notice how often you find the who am I voice popping up. Once you know, you cannot not know. And we're going to talk about what to do with that next, But a note of warning, watch out. It's really important to watch out for being ugly to yourself. What happens, because what happens when we buy into the negative self-talk? And there's a spot on your worksheet for like what our tendencies are, but I think it's really important to check in with what can happen when that who am I voice chimes in and why it's so important to keep our eye on it. When that mean old meanie pops up, it leaves a lot of intense and thoughtless reacting in a few different ways. For some of us, the tendency is to isolate, avoid, to hide out, stew, and engage in negative self-talk. And for others, the tendency is to people please, to become a perfectionist, to try and prove ourselves, and all the while still engaging in negative self-talk. So which one are you? Sometimes I think people can be all of them. So there's a space on your worksheet to reflect on this, to pay attention to what comes up. It's how you start to elevate your understanding of what's happening, to recognize the signs and make a different choice. Recognize the signs and run. Q-tip, also really important to commit to Q-tip. My friend made this picture and I just love it. Once we notice what the voice is telling us, we also get to decide whether we're going to take it personally. So I want to encourage you to stop taking your who am I voice so darn personally and make a commitment to speak more kindly to yourself. It can be hard with ingrained patterns of behavior to stop believing every negative thought we have about ourselves to be true, but it's honestly no joke essential. And seriously, if you won't be gentle with yourself, who will be? So again, super important to notice, get aware of what's going on, what's actually personal, what's actually truthful. And I'm a believer that honestly 95% of what happens, including that internal voice, is just not personal to us, because we, our subconscious, especially know our own fear triggers and are so good at freaking ourselves out. So don't buy the hype. Okay, to recap, know your tendency, clue into patterns, understand the source of your meanie or who am I voice. And that action item number 1 is awareness. Okay, so you're probably saying, now what? Or maybe you're saying, I get it. I'll start paying attention. My meanie stinks. I get it. So what? What do I do with it? That's action item number 2, tracking. So I have a form that I'll get the link to Christine to send to you. It's a tool that I'll give you guys access to. It's a tracking tool to get you started, because this stuff is really hard. It's really tough, and starting to get aware. The whole goal of that is to pick out patterns, which is the key next step. And if I'm working with any of you individually, I'd be helping you to specifically track in a way that works in a personalized way for you to attend to making changes to what that voice is telling you, because and I mean it, like, you cannot change what comes, not the thoughts, not the panic, not the worry. You can only be aware, acknowledge it, and learn to roll better. And one of the ways you do that is by developing a know language. So you can get started with tracking, which is the key next step with the form that I'll give you access to after the workshop. So action item number 2, after awareness, tracking. Once we've raised our awareness and started to track, patterns emerge. Why bother tracking patterns? It helps us to come up with replacement language. This is incredibly important, and the way we reboot our internal soundtrack. There's a section on the worksheet you have now under action item number 2 to start to think about this now, and you'll get more room for this on the handout I'll send you, but I do want to encourage you to take your time with this. It takes effort and thought, and we're not going to be able to get too deep into replacement stories tonight. It's just a function of time, but I'll be letting you know at the end. I'll give you my email so any of you can just be in touch if you have follow-up questions on that. But some starting, a few examples, like to start acknowledging that that negative self-talk, those negative patterns are happening, it's like you can tell yourself, well, that just happened, or, well, I just should, S-H-O-U-L-D, I just should all over myself. That's a big one. So definitely track, look for your patterns and come up with some, and that'll help you start to come up with some counter stories and messaging. So we track to find the patterns so that we can start to flip that language around and come up with a more positive internal story track. It's, again, a more involved process than we have time to really go through, but that's why I am layering in for this workshop a bonus item, which is mantras. It's especially important for those of you who are really new to finding your no. I'm a huge fan of repeating positive affirmations. I talk about them in blog posts with my clients. I really think they work. I think there are ways reminding ourselves to repeat the mantras, to look in the mirror, to tell ourselves that positive story. I often will advise people to schedule check-ins with themselves or get an accountability partner, a friend, or a coach to help hold you to your commitment to yourself to be more gentle and more positive. It's especially helpful to schedule a timeout when you're feeling rushed or pressured. So some examples of very, very simple mantras, and I think a lot of people have positive affirmations they like, but I'm worth it. I'm valuable. It's okay to not want to and to not. It's okay if others are disappointed. I'm a role model and have to act like one. My yes is powerful and meaningful and not just a giveaway. I can't do it all and I don't want to. Those are some real brief ones. One of my favorites is, and I do a lot of yoga, so I think this flows from that. It's a practice, not a perfect. It's how I stop myself from getting down or letting fear stop me from trying whatever I am afraid of trying. And another favorite that's specifically about flexing your no is the Stephen Covey quote. You have to decide what your highest priorities are and have the courage, pleasantly, smilingly, non-apologetically, to say no to other things. And the way to do that is by having a bigger yes burning inside. I think you heard me, maybe remember me referencing the bigger yes in the beginning of the workshop, and this really captures that can't or won't idea, and about making a choice that flows. Having a bigger yes that flows from what's important to you makes it a lot easier to flex that no, and you can do it with grace and kindness, which I'm going to give you some practical language in a few minutes to do that. But you have to have the confidence which flows from being clear on your priorities. Then limit setting becomes much more simple, and you can take it from working on, the inside to the outside. Practice on yourself and take it on the road. So, what action that we've already talked about tonight are you willing to commit to? And this is key. Commitment, setting limits with yourself, like that do not disturb at the front of the call, right? That little tiny action of just carving out that 1 hour builds confidence and tells yourself that you can do it with others. If you can do it with yourself, you can take that on the road into the world and do it with others. So that's why it's super important to wake up. Get aware, tune in, pay attention by, with tracking, and start to pick out those patterns. And changing the story and using mantras is a really big way of getting more positive with yourself and coming up with counterpoints. So which action do you think you might, make a little commitment to yourself if you're so bold? Take the action further and write yourself a new story. and try a few different approaches and see what fits. This is work and takes effort. It's tough work to do on your own, so please be sure to get in touch at the end. I'll be giving you my email so you can speak privately, especially if your question doesn't get answered in the Q&A or at the end, or you're not a classroom talker and prefer to speak privately. It's all good. So remember, a meanie, that who am I voice is powerful. It tells you you're not enough, that you're lacking. It has a poverty or impoverished mindset, which is not about money. It's about scarcity of other kinds of need, all kinds of needs. It's about old, ingrained, subconscious messaging patterns of behavior that are ingrained in us, and it is about fear. That meanie is rooted in fear, which serves to hold us back from authentically and with integrity setting a limit and flexing our no. So remember, that meanie is powerful, and you've been hanging out with it for a long time. So that's why it requires commitment. It requires reminders. I often will tell people to take that mantra, or if they don't want to take the whole mantra, take a word that will anchor them to that mantra and put it on their lock screen on their smartphone or their computer, or tape it to the bathroom mirror or inside the medicine cabinet. If you drive, I love visor, the flip down visor mirror is a great place for it. So just like little ways to remind yourself about how to practice these steps. Okay, so we're going to take it from the inside and take it out. So once you've worked on tracking some of these thoughts and start to identify when it's time to take a pause and apply some actual new and improved language to a situation. So here are some of my favorite realistic and practical quick tips for setting a no limit. Always, always, always encourage people to take a TO, a timeout. That enables you to delay and gather your thoughts and how you're feeling about a situation. So, and now here's some of the fun stuff for me. And some of the things I know maybe some of you were kind of excited about. So pausing, taking that time out is super powerful. Like I said, it helps you buy time, clarify your thoughts. But if you're really on the spot, my go-to back pocket is, of some offer for you or request. Thanks. I will have to check my schedule and get back to you. With that, often the intensity of the person's request passes, or they figure out another solution to the problem or to their question. They get someone else to do it, right? So I find that one very useful. Delay or decline. Especially if the person who's asked you to do something and you've talked about checking your schedule, they persist. If you're going to need an answer immediately, I'm going to have to choose to decline. Okay? Or, unfortunately, I'm not able to give this 100% of myself at this time. So I'm going to choose to say no. If you can wait 2 weeks, I'll be able, or however long, I'll be able to give this more of my attention. So the other thing I just want to add to that is remember integrity. If you tell somebody that you're going to get back to them, please do it. It's about honoring commitments, right? Including to yourself and to others. Don't blow off people or use it as a way to just have the problem vanish. I think it's really important to close the loop. So hopefully those are some helpful, and I'll send those to you too. They are in that, I think they're on that tracker, but I'll make sure that they are. But just some powerful ways to just quickly, practically, just decline with kindness. Okay, so to recap, 4 action items for tonight: awareness and tracking, replacement stories, and we are using mantras to be positive about those replacement stories and to start to reprogram and tell ourselves a more positive story, and practice, 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 right? Practice with the practical language, with some pat answers, with delaying and declining. And ultimately, with time and repetition, this deepens. It becomes the ingrained pattern of behavior, and we start to do a much better job automatically taking care of ourselves and setting our limits and flexing our no. So if you don't do this, then what? Well, nothing changes. Stay resentful. We'll get burnt out. Continue to fight. Get ill. I hope not. But, you know, if you do nothing, nothing changes, which leads to anger, resentment, self-soothing of the maladaptive type, burnout, fatigue. I'll just continue to do it myself, and being, you know, resentful and stewing. You know, I see it all the time. Relationships that break down and break up, friends turn into frenemies, people complaining about other people. Yuck. Who needs it? So what if you do it? Well, for me, and for many of my clients, balance, back, more balance. I got time back, time gained back. The burden of all that guilt lifted. More room for fun with kids, your beloved, your friends, yourself. Can make time for self-care. Whether even that's just a quiet meditation or some yoga or a walk, or sitting in, you know, the sun, whatever it is. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. More confidence for sure, and respect of yourself and from other people too. So like I said, I think if you want a little more, have a question, some people are not, you know, like I know, not classroom talkers, so if you have a question, we're going to go into questions, and you want to get in touch with me privately or interested in learning more about, you know, how to take some of this work deeper, happy to talk to you privately about it. And just be sure that when you email me, that you send me answer to these two questions. One, what's your biggest challenge, or what's the current challenge that you would like to some help with? And two, what you would like to get out of our conversation. That makes it easier for me to be sure that I can be helpful, and also, and if not, I can send you, you know, give you a referral or or make sure you get an alternate resource. So that is the end of me talking. And are there any questions? I think Christine, I don't know if there are any, because I can't see any of that.
Yeah, I've unmuted myself again, so I encourage you to write any of your questions in the questions section, and as they pop up, I'll read them out loud.
Cool. And I'll be sure to I'll get you that link, Christine, so that so people can have the tracker tool to get started.
Here's a question from Alice.
Okay.
Shoshanna, how do you do mantras? Written in a mirror to yourself throughout the day, morning or evening? What's most effective?
So it's a great question and totally personal. And I encourage people to play with it. I am a pen to paper person, and I like just for me, I find that the writing pen to paper, not on my computer, deepens integration. That's me. So I'll write it down, and then I'll tape it to my bathroom mirror. I live in New York City, so I do not, I don't own a car, and so I don't drive. But I used to live in LA, and I would tape it to the inside of my, you know, flip down visor mirror, so that when the sun came in, it would be like just a good reminder. I also think a really great place for anybody who has a smartphone is that lock screen. So every time you go to your phone, there's that reminder. You don't have to do the whole mantra, but if there's like an anchor word like valuable or yes or no or whatever is meaningful for, you know, for whatever's working, and they also change depending on what you're going through or struggling with, but those are some of the places that I have put them. I have also taped them in my desk. I've taped them on my computer screen, like in the top corner where it's not really in the way, or on the, you know, a blank spot on the keyboard. So is that helpful? I can keep going.
All right. You can circle back. Alice can ask a follow-up if she wants. Yeah. Hannah has a question. She says, something I struggle with is saying no to myself. I'm constantly putting pressure on myself to do more. Any advice for that?
I mean, that's where the work begins, Hannah. It's great, great, great. So I think really for you starting to, there's a few ways to go with this, but I really think sitting with what's the voice that's telling you that you can't say no to something, right? And are you actually weighing costs and benefits? Right? So, because remember, if you're saying yes to everything, you are saying no to stuff. And what are you saying no to? And are you saying yes to the right things? And it might be a longer conversation, but this is like, that's found the work that you're struggling with. And I think you're the HR finance graduate, you recent grad. This is foundational work to, flexing that muscle, right, is figuring out how to weigh the internal costs and balances and figure out where that pressure is coming from so that you can make really, really solid, confident, conscious choices about your bigger yeses. Does that make sense? Oh, it's so hard to not be in the chat.
I know, I'm sorry. As we get through, we'll probably hear affirmations of what makes sense and what doesn't.
Okay, good.
But in the meantime, I'm going to move on to Kia, who asks, what happens when a person does get mad? Quote, you constantly help others, why not me? They try to guilt you every time you do set boundaries.
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, so one of the ways, I mean, this one's a little strong, but I am going to just bust it out for everybody on the call because it's something that keeps me sane in a lot of areas in my life, especially with people who don't think about, people. I am the only person walking around in my brain and body, and everybody else is walking around in their brain and body, and I can't control that, anybody else but me. So, and I don't always like it, or, whatever. But what I will say to people who come at me with something strong like that is, well, we don't share that view. And that's a little strong, and maybe it's a little too strong for a workplace, but it's a perspective that I really like to share with people because it helps keep you intact around the way that you are thinking about things, and it also lets them do their thing. If you want to be softer with them, I try to be careful about throwing sorries around. I'm not big on that, but you could say, I guess you could say, I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm not big on throwing sorry around, but especially if it's something you haven't really done anything to apologize for. But I think it's important to be able to say, I don't actually agree with you that I help everybody else. Or you could try that one, and that's the practical language that I gave you before that says, I hear you that you need help, and I wish that I could give you 100% of my time right now, but I just cannot because of my other whatever commitments. And I'm just not sure if this is a work setting that you're talking about, but things like that where you're able to really explain to people, just where you're at. So hopefully that's helpful.
Hannah said thanks, so there's your affirmation there.
Okay, good. Okay. A lot of these I could just keep going, but at a certain point I'm like, oh, okay, it's,
There's no other questions. Actually, I had a question. So I might have missed it, but when you were talking about some of the language on how to buy yourself a little bit of time to consider whether you want to do it or not, what if you know right away that you don't want to do it? Do you still sort of pretend to buy time in order to let them down easy, or do you have some scripts for that?
Well, that depends. That totally depends on how comfortable you are within just a very confident, that's not, no, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I do have some scripts that I can send also, but I think it's if you're comfortable saying, I mean, if it's a tricky situation, Christine, I think it's always possible to say, I'm going to have to check my schedule and get back to you, and then get back to them and say, actually, it doesn't work in my schedule. Or if you know your schedule and you also know it's not going to work for you, just say, oh, I know I'm booked on that day. Wow, thank you so much for, inviting me into your book group. I really love to, I love to I love to read, and right now I just know that I don't have the time. I'm not going to be able to follow through on my commitment to the group.
Good.
My schedule won't permit it. Does that answer your?
Definitely.
Okay.
Other questions from anybody else in the group?
I want to circle back to Kia and make sure she felt like.
Kia, any follow-up or thoughts? Okay, here's Kia again. It's actually a friend who asks right when I have something important to do, an actor who will bring audition sides right before a big event. Interesting.
We'll bring audition, what was it? Sorry.
So it sounds like she has a friend who's an actor who will bring their material for an audition right when Kia's in the middle of something big or about to do something big.
And so maybe it's the kind of thing that Kia would normally, if she wasn't busy, would want to help with. I'm going to make that assumption for the sake of not being able to actually be in dialogue. But and if that's the case, yeah. So I think if that's the case, like, you really can authentically say to that person, I really would love to be able to help you with this. I know it's important, and I can't because I'm occupied with, or my schedule is, so, or I'm doing this, I'm swamped with. But I would love to help you in, and you could give them a date, especially if it's something you really want to help them. They're an actual friend, and there's give and take in friendships, and we help our friends, right? Hopefully there's give and take. So does that? I don't know if that's helpful, but
I may be off course here, but this is Christine. I'm wondering if that's not a situation. I liked one of the things you said at the beginning about people will adapt. And so I'm thinking possibly that person, if they've been depending on Kia, if she does say no and holds to it, that they maybe would find somebody else to help them with their auditioning and sort of widen their repertoire of who they can go to for help.
Yes, and would also get used to not coming to Kia last minute for help and expecting her to be able to drop everything, right? So they might get into the better habit of, like, I've got an audition in a week, Kia. Do you think you might have some time in the upcoming week to help me? If Kia gets better at setting the limit and being authentically sincere about it and saying, I'd love to be able to help you in 3 days or a week, but I just can't do it now. So, yeah.
Alice has another question. She says she wants to circle back to people who refuse to accept no. How do you do that interpersonally with family members? For instance, with a particular family member, if I say I'm busy generally one day, they immediately ask for my time another day. The no slides off like Teflon.
So are you talking about so sounds like it's a different situation to Kia, so it's like something you just never want to do?
Let's see.
Or is it just like that people want to take what they can get from Alice? Happens.
I'm just focused on my bigger yes, Alice says.
Yeah, which is about setting your own priorities and time with using your time judiciously and how you want to use it. Yeah, there's something about that's, I think, that's just landing with me like a really a bigger issue than just about not. That feels a lot like. Sorry, I'm having trouble with word finding her, so I can answer it the way I mean to. It's forming in my brain. This one feels a lot about slippery boundaries, right? So maybe you have some family members who are very good boundary testers and not boundary respecters. And I think that's definitely a flexing your no muscle issue, and it's also a bigger issue about setting boundaries and making sure that you stay very firm with them about your time and your space, and I'm just, just guessing, right? Um, um, but I think this is something, there's some people, like there's people in your life who are used to you being malleable, um, being able to work you, which I get, because remember, like, that I have been there, cajoled or guilted into saying yes. And I'm just wondering if there's a little bit of that that's going on here, that people know that they can maybe over time wear you down.
Okay, before, Alice might have a follow-up, but in the meantime, Hannah asks, language for saying no but not sorry. I agree women say sorry too much and need to be
Way too
careful
much.
about using that language.
Yeah, way too much. Yeah. Yeah, agreed.
So I think, is she asking, I think she's asking for alternatives, like how can
Oh,
you
I'm
know,
sorry. I thought it was a, sorry, Hannah. I thought it was a, okay. I thought it was a, yes,
comment, not a
agreed.
question.
Yeah, comment, not a question. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a big believer in in thanking people for an offer. People, I always, my way about I work really hard to go through life is assuming the best in people, and that their offers and are made from, and requests are made flow from kindness, or, wanting me to be, participate in something or help them, which means that they think I'm great and super capable, and so they want me to participate. So I always try to think the best of people, and so I always suggest thanking people for opportunities, and going with, and my schedule won't allow it, so I'm choosing to say no.
I like that, choosing to say no.
Yeah, I think it's a big shift for people, Christine. That people say we say sorry a lot. So I think also, yes, I think women say sorry a lot. I also think we say, I'm going to say no. I'm going to decline, and which is sort of, I think, a little passive, and I feel like still leaves a future-esque quality to it. I mean, it is that it's grammatically that way, and I think, just I think choosing, I am choosing, not I'm going to choose. It's just more, it's just more structured, and it also, that I like that word choice, because it also underscores that, bigger yes thing. What are you saying? What are you saying? What are you saying no to, so your bigger yes can flow?
Right. Kia says, thank you. I will try to set boundaries with kindness, but some people test the boundaries. I think mine is similar to Alice. And Alice says, that sounds right. Thank you so much. I will write you further about it.
Yeah, people are tenacious. And especially if you are kind of like a helper, doer, achiever, yes, yes, yeser, which I think high achieving professional women. I didn't get a sense of everybody on the call, but if you showed up tonight, chances are you are inclined to be helpful or a doer. I don't want to make assumptions, but you're a go-getter kind of a person, and people get used to you saying yes. And it gets you in a tricky spot that when you start to say no, these sort of more tenacious, um, I always have this image of like someone can't get through the gate in the fence, so then they go around the fence, or they go over the fence. And that's a lot of these sort of, where they try to get a trampoline and hop over your fence, right? Try to find, that's tenacity. And I think people, when we've trained people that we'll say yes and that we can do it all, which we cannot, you'll find that it's an adjustment for people. But remember, my grandmother said, the first time they don't like it, but they get used to it. And so it really does come down to practice.
All right, well, we're at 8:02.
Okay.
I don't see any further questions at the moment, so why don't we take a moment, any final words of wisdom to wrap us up?
Practice, practice, practice. Yeah, just remember to, I would say, pick one of the things that we talked about today to really say, I'm going to take that on. And so whether it's just tuning in a little bit and sitting with that voice, picking a low-stakes situation like, um, uh, uh, I really need to do a bit of writing for work today or for my personal life, and so I'm going to turn that Do Not Disturb sign on my, I'm going to put that Do Not Disturb on my computer. Um, and maybe what comes up for you if that's not something you're used to doing, right? Because it is setting a limit. Or, working it out with your beloved or partner or whatever, or your kids or whoever about who's going to take the dog for a walk or empty the dishwasher, and what comes up when you just are not, it's not going to be you this time. So low stakes, you don't have to fight about it, but just giving yourself little opportunities to tune in to what comes up inside of you and building that awareness. So that's I think just a great first step. But commit to something, and if it's not awareness, something else.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Shoshanna. I really appreciate you taking
Thanks.
time out of your evening to share your tips and language and action steps with us. And thanks to all of you for joining in. And Shoshanna has agreed to have the webinar recorded and archived, so I'll send everybody the link to that, if not tomorrow, the following day. And then follow up. Shoshanna has a couple of follow-up items as well, so we'll keep passing things along, as well as information about future expert calls.
Great. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So how do you know when you're out?
All right. Good night, Shoshanna. Thanks.
Oh, good night. Thanks. Before I leave.